JoePags.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email. It's all right there. Also, Newsmax TV. It's the Joe Pags Show. Glad to have you along for the ride. Really glad to have from Campus Reform. It is Eduardo Neret, great correspondent. And what school do you go? You go to University of Florida?
University of Florida, yeah.
All right, and again, we talked about this. I grew up more of a hurricane because we actually, my marching band in South Florida at Atlantic High School, we went down and we marched with the band, and that was it. I was a hurricane because of that. But also Seminoles, I was okay with Florida State. University of Florida for me, dude, I'm sorry, I like them. Third place. So now you grew up in Miami. What are you doing pulling for the Gators? What is up with that?
Well, both my parents went to the University of Florida. A lot of other family members, so it's kind of born and raised type thing. But I've got some family members who are Seminoles too, and of course, growing up in Miami, all my friends were Canes, so I'm familiar with the whole divided houses and stuff of that nature.
I heard what you said though. You're a Gator, and then you pull for the Seminoles. You never once said you liked the Hurricanes, so you're a Hurricane hater. You actually hate the Hurricanes, don't you? Because I've seen those shirts, dude. Yeah. I've seen the shirts. Yeah. You know, I think that one year the Seminoles beat the Hurricanes, and then the Hurricanes went on to win the national championship, and the shirts were Seminoles 17, National Champs 10, or something like that. So there's a lot of that in Florida. People don't even realize how intense that is, do they?
It's tough, and I always decide when UM is playing FSU, I'm like, am I going for either of them? Do I want one to lose over the other? But I don't like the Canes, man. I'm not a big Canes fan.
I find that to be true. Either you're a Hurricanes fan or you hate them. You either pull for the Hurricanes, or if you're on the other side, you pull for anybody who's playing them. All right, it is Eduardo Neret. Let's get into the topics. The hot topic right now continues to be the Mueller report release. Exoneration. There's no Russian collusion. There is no obstruction. The report is out there. The left is still freaking out. I'm wondering, because college campuses, generally speaking, lean left, and some of them lean extremely far left, is there any blowback at the University of Florida? Are people even talking about this?
Well, I've heard from professors. I have a couple friends who are political science majors, and I've heard some of them come up to me and say, my professor had been saying for weeks, there's collusion. Our president had help from the Russians. And so, of course, now those professors kind of have to, eat crow over this whole thing. In terms of students, though, the college Republicans on campus, the day after the president was exonerated, we tabled and they had a sign out saying, the president is exonerated. But we didn't really get much pushback from the liberal students. I don't think they keep up with the day-to-day messaging in terms of the Mueller report.
Well, and the reason why is because they're waiting for somebody to indoctrinate them about what it means. I mean,
they have to have someone has to tell them, and because no one was able to tell them, hey, the president colluded with Russia, they never got to it.
And we conservatives tend to actually pay attention and then decide what we think after we get the facts. That's the difference in a nutshell. His name is Eduardo Neret. He's a great reporter over at campusreform.org. Campusreform.org, I go there every morning. These reporters are doing a great job and putting the legacy media to shame. His Twitter is EDUNERET. EDUNERET. Go there and follow him right now. All right, let's get into the topics. Goodbye, George is the headline. So at a university named after our first president, they don't want him to be the mascot. Help me out here.
They don't want the Colonials to be the mascot. Look, the first thing I can say is my first reaction is these kids are ignorant, okay? Number two is if they don't like the name of the mascot, nobody forced them to go to George Washington University. You could have gone anywhere else. But what they've done now is they've voted to remove the mascot, the Colonial, because they say it's one of the students in the video, and I invite your viewers to go to campusreform.org to see the video, but they say it's kind of white supremacist-y, it's a little racist. And my response to them, look, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, our founders didn't create colonialism. They didn't create slavery.
No.
They were born into that world. But they created a system by which over time those systems could be eliminated, and that's actually what ended up happening. And to call the colonial nickname, which was, anyone who was living in the colonies at that time was a colonial, to try to equate that with some European colonist going into native lands and killing natives. I mean, George Washington didn't do that, and it's just ridiculous that these students can't connect the dots and put that together.
Well, one wonders, Eduardo, do the students not realize that the land in which they live, that gives them the right to freely speak and to freely express and freely worship and so on, that land started from colonies. Without the colonies, we don't have this country. What did they think was going to happen? We'd still have all of this, but we weren't going to make little colonies of people? What is the mindset? Can you even get into that mindset?
I just think this is a group of kids. My generation is the first or second generation of students who, since they were in elementary school, have been indoctrinated by left-leaning professors and taught to hate this country. So they go through class, through middle school, high school, America's a racist country. America is a hateful country. And after a while, if you repeat stuff enough to some students, it kind of sticks. And so they're unable to explain it. They don't understand. And it's actually quite sad because, again, I go back to what I said before. What makes this country great is that people like George Washington, the rest of our founders, were able to recognize some of the societal ills. They were against slavery, but they created a system by which these ills could be changed over time, and they did that. And again, They were born into that era. They did not create colonialism. They didn't create slavery. So to hold them by that standard is ridiculous.
It is Eduardo Neret. Now, I said your Twitter was EDUNERET. Is it NARET? Well, what is your Twitter?
No, and it's EDUNERET. So
okay,
Edu, and then my last name, Neret.
Yeah, I've got your name spelled with an A before that. That's why I asked. Okay, EDUNERET. His name is Eduardo Neret. All right, so that's an interesting take, and you're right that they're being indoctrinated horribly. They don't know what colonialism is. They don't know that the slave trade wasn't a bunch of white people showing up in Africa stealing people. They were African tribal leaders who were black selling their own family members. That was the way it was. That was what the world looked like back then. And you're right. We, through our process of freedom and liberty, have solved the problem. We solved it a long time ago, and a lot of blood was shed. So again, I don't think if you actually had a one-on-one with them and said, okay, tell me specifically what colonies are, what colonialists are, and why you got such a problem. I'll bet they couldn't answer the question. They just know colonialism is bad.
Right, because someone has told them that. Someone has told them this country was founded on racist principles. And look, you again, I invite your viewers to go, because if you watch the video, you can tell I'm going to do an imitation of the students. They're there speaking to the camera saying, well, it's like it's like a little white supremacist-y. And, anyone who says like in between every other word, you can tell they're just not all there in terms of the information and the knowledge. So
I would agree.
It's just these students, some of them, you can debate them, you can show them a book. But again, this repetition, this repeated indoctrination, it goes a long way in some of these minds.
It is Eduardo Neret. He's a great correspondent over at campusreform.org. Arizona students are facing charges after heckling Border Patrol agents. Is this when the agents were on the campus trying to recruit people? When did this happen?
They were on campus for career day, speaking to criminal justice students a few days ago. Yeah. And basically, you can see the video on our webpage of some students going and protesting, interrupting their speech to the student, kind of saying, oh, this is the murder patrol, Custom and Border Patrol. This is the murder patrol. You've killed students. You've killed children. This is an extension of the KKK. And actually, this has been happening across campuses across the country. We saw it here at the University of Florida a few weeks ago. There was an ICE demonstration, an anti-ICE. And I actually went up to some of the people protesting ICE, and I said, this is a law enforcement agency. They save lives. They do drug busts. They bust human trafficking rings. So they're saving people left and right. What do you have against them? And these students say back to me, they've killed people. They killed people who were in ICE detention. And what they're referring to are the people who have been detained at the border, who come to the border very malnourished. And what the problem is ICE and Customs and Border Patrol do not have enough agents to the people who get at the border. And by the time they're able to get to these individuals and treat them, they're already very ill, very sick. And actually, some of these immigrants have actually made statements on the record saying, look, Customs and Border Patrol, DHS, they did everything they could to save my child. But, it didn't work. And that's what happens when you make a hundreds of mile trek to the United States without proper food, without proper water.
Right.
You get here malnourished. And there's hundreds of thousands. And by the time we want to treat them, it's too late.
Well, why exactly isn't the onus on or the responsibility on the father? Like that 7-year-old girl that died, the father hadn't fed her. It took her on a 1,500-mile trek through wilderness and horrible conditions, and somehow ICE killed her? No, the father's bad lack of responsibility and basic ignorance and belligerence, that's why she died. His negligence is why she passed away. And you're right, the Border Patrol did everything they could, ICE did everything they could to save her life, but the fact is, he put her at peril. He should not have done what he did. These students don't even consider that, do they? Just ICE equals bad because I was told they're bad.
They don't understand that. And what's shocking, too, in the Arizona case from the story that we're talking about, the Student Government Association came on and basically supported the protesters, saying, Customs and Border Patrol's presence on our campus is alarming to immigrant students, is alarming to DACA students, and it makes them feel threatened. And they're recruiting for a job fair. These are people who protect our country, protect our borders, from criminal gangs, from drug gangs, from human traffickers, and yet somehow they're villains. It's astounding.
It's Eduardo Neret from campusreform.org. Go there every day like I do. His Twitter is @EDUNERET. Make sure you go follow him right now. I'm about to when I get done with this interview, Eduardo. One last one. I've got about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. Gender gap. Sure. I thought this was about the pay gap. It's not. You're saying this is about the graduation and diplomas and degree gap that's allegedly there between men and women, and you guys do a report that completely blows it out of the water. Fill me in.
Right. So we took this report from AEI and summed it up. Basically, since 1982, women have earned 13 million more degrees than men across the board. Stop.
13 million? I mean, that's an unbelievable number.
Degrees. It is. And women outnumber men in a lot of college campuses right now in fall enrollment. Most campuses, it's a 55-45 split. And that's great. I mean, considering where women used to be in education, I mean, it's a good thing that they're doing well. But the point of the article is, okay, there are a lot of scholarships just for women. There are a lot of fellowships just for women. Women are doing fine in education. From middle school to high school, they get better grades than their boy counterparts.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we be stepping back as a society and saying, okay, our boys are clearly struggling in school. What can we do now for them? Should we do scholarships for boys? The second you say that, you're suddenly a sexist, someone who... You're
a misogynist. You hate the women. Absolutely. Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, I got to tell you, that's a startling number. I'm glad you guys did that report because you're right. In our society, no matter what the issue is, you could fill in the blank. No matter what it is, women somehow are being paid less. They're getting less time off. They're being worked harder. They're not getting degrees. They have no opportunity. And it's all BS. And I love how you guys expose the BS. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It's Eduardo Neret, Neret. Go follow him on Twitter, EDUNERET. And also go to campusreform.org every day like I do. Eduardo, great job today. I appreciate it. Let's do it again.
Yes, thank you so much. And check out Campus Reform. They do great work.
Absolutely. We're back after this at the Joe Pag Show. Stay right here.